never knew where I was going to go. I never knew what I was going to do. I couldn't relax because I had to stay on the move. You can't stay here. The light, flashing light in my face. Oh God. And this is what this society has come to. And so I make a plea to you right now. Do the right thing. Care for the senior citizens. They have built this country. They have paid taxes. They have raised their families. And the society is known by how they treat the elderly, the senior citizens. It'll go down in history. So this is all I want to say is, do the right thing. Help us. Because guess what? We pay our taxes. We're willing to pay our taxes. We're willing to be law-abiding. We're willing to help each other. Now, help us. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. That was a very powerful, compelling testimony. Thank you. We are going to our next speaker. Her name is Blanca Ojeda. She is a community organizer with Faith in the Valley. Blanca, welcome.
Thank you. I organize specifically in the small area of, it's in Merced County. And I wanted to, more than anything, I'm coming in to share the story of one of the residents that I've had the opportunity to work alongside with and help out. She wants her name to remain anonymous because she is an undocumented farm worker. And she's a mother of 2 smaller children, also a wife. And earlier in the pandemic, what her situation was that she lives with her husband and rents a small trailer home. And when the pandemic first hit, her husband was employed through the landlord that owned the property there. And he was a dairy worker. So because he worked for the landlord, his rent and utilities were paid through kind of like the work that he did. And she was a seasonal farm worker. Every time when the season would start, she would usually go further down south, and she would take her children with her. She would rent a room out there. That's what she would do because there are certain programs that as an undocumented individual, even though it is for farm workers that it is available to, it's not for undocumented folks. So she kind of would have to network and figure out where she would be renting a room from. So when the pandemic first hit, she was impacted through, as a farm worker, the hours or the season started in a little later. And they were also low wage earners. When all of this happened, the landlord then decided to sell everything, and so it changed. Everything changed ownership, and
thank you. Yeah, we're a little bit north of the Central Valleys, but the homelessness crisis here is so serious that as I speak, they're evicting people from the parks. And a lot of organizers are wondering if there's any legal recourse they might have at all, since they're just basically being told to sleep on sidewalks, but not to erect any kind of structure around them.
Anyone wants to answer that question? Or in Chico? Well, I know it's probably a local issue. Here in LA, people are sleeping in the parks, and so far that I know, they have not been evicted. But that's, I guess, it's local.
It is very definitely a local issue, and I wasn't planning to ask the question, but
Yeah. Okay.
it is ongoing.
Well, Janine and Cozy, who's going to speak next, may have an answer to this question now. Can you address this, Janine, before you speak?
Can you repeat the question, please?
It's about people sleeping in the parks and being evicted from the parks, being told to sleep somewhere else.
Is there any legal recourse? Is there any way people can sue if there's nowhere for them to go?
I honestly don't know the answer.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear now?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
How did you get mail
Oh,
and checks and donations?
okay. How I did that was I got a PO box, and that's how I was able to keep in contact with people and get my mail and take care of the little bills and stuff that I had. So,
and just if I can add to that,
We can't really hear you, Tony.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to move on to our last speaker, Janine and Cozy, who you already have met because she already spoke, but now she's going to present. She's regional advisor of Faith in the Valley. Janine, please go ahead.
Everyone, I'm going to go ahead and share some slides. And let's see. Where's the present mode? Oh, here we go. Faith in the Valley, we are a grassroots community organization across the Central Valley. We organize in Kern, Fresno, Merced, Stanislaus, and San Joaquin County, and we bring people together. We organize power from the ground up. We pass policy, we do research, trying to advance economic and racial justice across all of our counties. We have done a series of community-based research reports, a series called Evicted in the Central Valley. We did one in Fresno, one in Kern, and one in San Joaquin County. And this is the labor of students and community organizers and residents and people coming together to systematically document the eviction crisis, the housing crisis in the Central Valley. We analyzed thousands of court records. We have found that evictions happen at a higher rate in the Central Valley than in anywhere else in California. Prior to COVID, this is a snapshot right here of what the crisis looked like even before we had the pandemic. So we had thousands of households that were being evicted annually across the Central Valley. In 2019, when the Central Valley had its lowest level of unemployment since before the Great Recession, this is a snapshot. And just the 5 counties where we organized, there were 12,000 eviction cases that were filed with the courts. And the research shows that there are likely twice as many evictions that happen informally outside of the courts. And so this is the picture of what it looked like before COVID. And what we all know is that COVID has compounded and exacerbated the crisis that we were already experiencing. This right here is a snapshot of unemployment, like initial unemployment claims that were filed. So what you see here is in 2019, this is a picture of what unemployment, like those initial unemployment filings look like. And then March of 2020, when we see, the statewide shelter in place, when we see the closure of businesses and our schools, then we see a spike, right? So beginning, in April, we see nearly over a 600% increase in initial unemployment filings. In September, it peaked to nearly 650,000. And this is really important. The reason why we bring information like this is because we're always sitting in meetings with elected officials wanting to pass strong policies and protections to safeguard our families, and we're always being asked to provide evidence. This is compelling evidence of what the state of the economy looks like and how many people are being impacted right now because of the pandemic. And so then we have a snapshot here where Dr. Amber Crowell out of Fresno State, she's our regional housing coordinator, she adapted the methodology from the Bay Area Equity Atlas so that we could try to get a sense of how many renter households in our counties were vulnerable to eviction. And so what we find is that if we don't have strong protections, eviction ordinances and moratoriums to keep our families housed, if we don't have enough rent and mortgage and utility relief to keep families in their home, then we estimate that 100,000 households in the Central Valley are vulnerable to eviction. But let's be clear, these are only households. This is not that one person lives in every one of these households. So at minimum, we're talking about 300,000 individuals or people who in our community, in these 5 counties, who are vulnerable and at risk of being put out of their homes. We did a COVID-19 housing impact survey, and I would love to be able to, maybe I can ask Blanca to share the link. We're launching this again because January 31st, the only statewide protection that we have in place in California is going to be expiring. So in July and August, when we were trying to pass AB, it was 1436 at the time, we were able to organize and pass AB 3088. We did this survey and we found that 55% of the renter households who responded, they didn't have any, very little confidence in being able to pay their rent. We're launching this survey again in both English, Spanish, Hmong, and Punjabi. And so we'll get this out to you all because we need strong evidence that we can take to our local, our state leaders and put the pressure on them to extend the policies that have been put in place and also to strengthen them. So the other piece of, there's so much research and information in these reports that we put out. And the only other piece that I want to uplift in this space today is the huge disparities in legal representation. So in addition to analyzing court records, we spent over 3 months in eviction court observing, systematically documenting what is the process. What happens when a family member or someone shows up to eviction court? It is an eviction mill. Within, literal minutes, the next one, the next one, the next one, people, decisions being made and people being put out of their homes. So here what we're looking at is in 2019, this is the most active landlord attorney in Fresno County. Handled 643 cases, whereas the most active defendant attorney, Tenants who had an attorney, handled 6 cases. These are huge disparities. This is when we look at the picture overall. Out of 1,000 court records that we analyzed for Fresno County, and we did this across the board in all of our counties, 73%. That's 730 landlords who had an attorney in eviction court and less than 1% of tenants. This is the